Welcome to Lifepoint Church Online. Today we have our first message in our new series, We Are the Church. We have Zac Sweetman speaking. Thanks, guys.
I don't know if you know this church very well, or if you're visiting for the first time, but we have a senior pastor here. His name is Dan. He's in the front row here. Just Dan, give a holler or a wave. Oh, good. Beth's already cheering for Dan. I like that. We're an encouraging church. And he's actually my brother. We've got a picture of Dan and I growing up together. Look at this. Oh, collective ohs. That's beautiful. That's Dan. I'm trying to show me how to play Game Boy. And I have another brother as well. So I'm like the youngest by 5 years. This is my other brother. Look at that. It looks like we're recording like an album. It's like we're Hanson Brothers or something. Do you remember that band, Hanson? So yeah, I was the youngest of three boys, and it was a challenge at times. It was tough. We were only allowed to play computer games on one day of the week, Saturday. For some of you, that's like beyond comprehension. We're only allowed to play computer games one day of the week, and I had two older brothers, and so I had to get up really early to get control of the computer so I could try and play it before they could push me off because they were stronger and more powerful. And so this one Saturday morning, I get up early, I get down, it's just my luck, there's no one at the computer, and we're playing this game called Age of Empires. Has anyone heard of this? Yeah, we have all this stuff going on at church, and that gets the biggest cheer. Age of Empires, look out. So got on Age of Empires, and I started playing, and I was only as old as I was in that photo, so I didn't really know what I was doing in the gaming world. And what do you do when you don't know what you're doing? You use the cheat codes, all right? So I need some cheat codes, but I wasn't old enough to even remember the cheat codes, so I think, oh no, my lovely, kind, pastoral-hearted older brother Dan will be able to help me with this. So I go into Dan's room, he's asleep. I thought, that's not a big problem here. So I just kind of gently nudge him. He was always such a caring, loving brother, and I gently nudge him. I'm like, Dan, what are the cheats for Age of Empires? And he kind of rolls over, makes eye contact with me in a beautiful, kind, sweet-hearted, older brother way, just puts out his hand, changes it into a fist, and punches me straight in the face. That's what it was like being a youngest brother. I ran out of the room. I don't think I cried. I don't think I even told my parents. I just kind of took it on the chin and kept living life. That kind of turned me off gaming for forever, and I ended up becoming a HPE teacher. So yeah, I kind of dodged a bullet there. So thank you so much. We are, as Corey said, we're talking about the church. We're talking about what it means to be the church. And so we're going to look at a piece of scripture that's actually written just for the church. If you're familiar with the story of Christianity, what happened is Jesus came to this earth. He lived, he died, he resurrected, he ascended into heaven, and this kind of kicked off this movement of the people of God who are called the church. The passage that we're looking at today is written in that kind of time where Jesus has ascended and left and gone to heaven, and he's giving, the writer of this passage in Hebrews is giving some advice about what it looks like to be the church. Now, I thought I'd just define kind of exactly what we mean when we say the church. It's a broad term. And I went to my favorite writer. His name's Dallas Willard, and he kind of knows everything. So this is what he had to say the church is. The church in the New Testament is the, whatever that word is, or called out ones in a particular city or parish. So Christ, which is Jesus, is the head of the church, universal, and its churches. And each church is made up of children of light who are to light up their world. Powerful picture. Children of light who light up their world. It says that they're the called out ones. I don't know if you knew this, but if you're a Christian here tonight, you've been called out. You've been chosen. Like I said, I'm a HPE teacher. Often at times we have to select teams. And when I'm selecting a basketball team, I call some out. I say, I want you, no, not you, but I want you. We fill the team up, we choose them and call them out and say, we're going to go on a journey together. We're going to win some games. We're going to do some training. We're going to go to some tournaments. And if you're a Christian here tonight, you have been chosen. You've made the team. You've been called out. And so what is the next step? When we're talking about the church, it's not just the Sunday gathering here. When we're talking about being a light to the world, it's everywhere. The church is everywhere. We, as the people of Christ, go and take it. And so we're talking about like the official gatherings here, kind of Sunday services. We talked about small groups before as well, but also the unofficial can also be the church, catching up with people, standing up for justice, living your life with Jesus is what the church is. So what is the next step? We're going to get into the passage tonight. We'll chuck it up on the screen. This is the advice. Let us hold unswervingly to the hope we profess, for he who promised is faithful. And let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching. I want to let you in on some insider knowledge here, and that is that the church that was written to nearly 2,000 years ago was doing it tough. It's been shown that there's some persecution going on. We don't know if that's like death threats or maybe some killing going on. Like it's intense stuff, or maybe they're just really kind of ostracized from society, but they were doing it tough, doing it really hard. It's not as intense as being the youngest of three brothers, but just like me getting punched in the face, it was tough, it was difficult. And our church in Australia here maybe doesn't have that same kind of intense kind of pressure or persecution, but we have to admit, sometimes it feels tough. I know sometimes when I'm coming to church on a Sunday night here, and it's a bit shameful to admit it, but sometimes I'm like, I've got a big week this week. I'm pretty tired, I'm spent. I've got to get ready to prepare for the work week. It just seems like a big effort to make it out sometimes. I don't know if you've ever felt like that. Church can feel tough. You might be sitting here tonight and thinking, I've got so much to do in my life. How am I meant to fit this thing called church in? You might be thinking you've come along and no one really talks to me, or you don't know anyone, and you're thinking, this is tough. You might not connect with the worship or the message. You might think it doesn't really even make a difference, does it? Like, does this church thing actually change stuff? It can feel tough sometimes, and I just want to relate to you and say, I understand that. I've felt that. There's this assumed culture in church too, which kind of is a paradox with it, is that we kind of say you should come to more church things, you should do more church things, you should serve, you should go to a small group, you should come along each week, you should do all this stuff. And it's kind of grinding against the fact that it feels tough. And so my first point tonight is church can feel tough. The early church felt this, and that is a normal thing. If you're sitting here tonight thinking, gee, it feels tough sometimes, that's okay. It's normal. The early church, when we think of the early church, often we think about it's this incredible thing and everything was just perfect. And what does that passage say? Some were already giving up on it. It felt tough. And like anything that feels tough, the next question I always ask is this worth it? I recently had the headlight in my car go out. I don't know if you've had this happen to you before, but you have to change it. As the responsible male in my household, it's suddenly my responsibility to fix the headlight. So I go to Autobarn, you buy the new bulb, you try and act like you could easily change it yourself, but if the person behind the counter is happy to help out, maybe they could do it for you. That's kind of the way I kind of do it. Make it seem like I've got my dignity and can do it, but try and convince them to. That worked, by the way, and they came out to change it over, but they couldn't work it out. And I thought, I've got Buckley's, like no chance of getting this thing to work. So I took it home. It probably took me about 2 hours just to get the cap off. No, that was a joke. It took me ages to work it out, and you're looking at it, and you're like, it's a really tight space kind of behind the headlight, so your hand's getting cut up, and I got really delicate basketball playing hands and piano hands, not manual labor hands. And so like my hand's getting cut up, I've got like nice clothes on, I didn't really prepare for it, and it's getting like grease and stuff all over them, and it's feeling tough, I'm going to be honest. It was tough to get this light bulb back in. And that is why the light bulb just sits loose and flaps around while I'm driving now, because I gave up. I thought it's not worth it anymore. I'm just going to give up on this thing. Sometimes things feel so tough, we question whether it's worth it. I'm sure you've done this in relationships or friendships or even work. There's pressure, there's pain, there's difficulties, there's stress. And we think, is this thing even worth it? You may even think that way about church tonight. You might have been coming along for a while, and you're thinking, is this thing actually worth it? That's not the end of the sermon tonight. Wouldn't be a very encouraging sermon if it was. But let's be honest, that's the way we can feel at times. I want to give a picture, while we're in this space, I want to give a picture of what the church can be. I'm just going to share 3 stories of what the church can be. When we're thinking, is this thing really worth it? This is what the church can do. I'm going to start with hospitals. A while ago, I had like an allergic reaction to something. And what happened is I started to come out in all these hives and my throat started to close up. And I was like coughing. I needed to go to the hospital. I go to the hospital. They gave me a shot of something and I'm here today. The allergic reaction went down. And I went to the hospital. They cared for me. They took me in. They looked after me and I'm better. This wasn't always a thing. I did some research into this, and there's a quote from a researcher up on the screen here. The hospital was, in fact, a Christian thing. It was a church's idea. It says there, the hospital in origin and conception is a distinctively Christian institution. It's rooted in the Christian concepts of charity. All right? Today, you can go down, if you're feeling sick, you can go somewhere and receive help because this is what the church has done. A church stood up and said, you know what, this isn't good enough. There needs to be a place people can receive help. People can be taken in and cared for. This is what the church has done. As I was doing some research, I came across this story in the year 250 AD. So this is before the Roman Empire was a Christian nation, just beforehand. There was a smallpox epidemic. We're familiar with epidemics at the moment, aren't we? There was a pandemic. It was going through, and people were getting sick and dying from smallpox. And the Roman people blamed the Christians. They thought it's because the Christians weren't sacrificing to their gods. They weren't playing by the rules of the culture, that it was their fault that this pandemic was going on. And so in the midst of this persecution and blame and frustration, I know what I would do. I'd be like, stuff you guys, it's not our fault. And it wasn't the Christians' fault. But this is what one pastor had to say in the midst of this. There is nothing remarkable in cherishing merely our own people. We should love our enemies as well. The good should be done to all, not merely to the household of faith. And in that idea, the hospital was born. That's what the church can do. If you're thinking, is the church worth it? Christians, people of light, became a light to their community through starting hospitals. Come on, isn't that good? Bring it on. This is what the church can be. I'm going to take it one step closer. This is a photo of some people. This was taken probably in the 80s, and this is a photo of a church. It's church family, probably smaller. I think it was about 60 people at this stage, so smaller church than Lifepoint. This church met at Redcliffe, and it was called Redcliffe Christian Assembly. This church, the way that they could be a light to their community would be by starting a school. And they started a school. It's called Mueller College. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It meets kind of behind us down over here. I actually work at that school as well. This is the way they decided they were going to be a light. In my research, I found out that when they stepped out in faith, they bought this land, and they didn't actually have enough money to build any buildings on it for the church. For the school. They didn't have enough money to build the school. And so 4 families sold their homes and lent the money interest-free to the church so that they would have some money to build the school buildings. This is how they would decide to be a light to their community. Take it one step further. The next photo here is a photo of my wife. She's just a little girl in that photo, and that's her mum. And at this point, my wife's Mariah there, her mum was a young single mum. Didn't have a whole lot of money or resource at that point in time. And yet Mariah's mum wanted a good education for her with no means to actually pay for private schooling. And because this church, Redcliffe Christian Assembly, decided to be a light to the community, they were able to provide the means for Mariah to go to that school. So my wife got to experience a Christian education. She got to find a community. She got to learn a lot about Jesus. She got to grow into the person that she is today because the church decided we're going to be a light to our community. Come on. Isn't that powerful? I benefit from that, from the great woman that Mariah is, the great wife that she is. This is what the church can be. We're going to take it one step closer. Lifepoint. What is the type of church that God's called Lifepoint to be? Dan's written this down, and I'm going to read it to you. This is what we call Lifepoint's vision, 5-year vision for the future, the church that we want to be. And I haven't taken all of it. I've just kind of condensed it down, but just read with me. You can follow along on the screen here. This is the picture of the church we want to be. Lifepoint is a growing and vibrant church in Moreton Bay. Whoever said that the church is dying forgot to tell these people. It's a place and people known in this region for being incredibly welcoming and strangely authentic. People just seem real, even in fact that they are messy. They incessantly talk about Jesus and have many stories of what they claim this ancient carpenter has actually done in their actual lives. It's hard to shut them up about it, actually. There is a tangible and undeniable sense of God being alive here. They love to pray and sing way too much and for way too long, and when they do, powerful and strange things happen. Most surprisingly, every single month there are multiple people who previously called themselves agnostic or atheist or not religious or not a church-type person who are making a decision to follow Jesus and then doing this strange thing where they get baptized underwater. When asked how they came to make this strange decision, they almost always respond with the same thing. Someone liked me, invested in me, and invited me to discover Jesus. And it turns out he is way better than I could ever imagine. That's going to be the journey of Lifepoint. This is the journey that God's inviting us as a church to go on. And what are we going to do? We're going to find out that God's way better than we could ever imagine. I love that line. We're going to find out God's way better than we could ever imagine. You might be thinking, I want to be part of something like that. This is what the church can be. And so we're just going to look at two quick things now. What does it look like? If we want this to be our church, if we're struggling with doubt and not sure if this whole thing's worth it, but we think, yep, that's what we want to be, what are we going to do? How are we going to light up our world? Be the children of light that God's called us to be. So, these are the two things, and we're going to start by going back to the passage if we can, to just reread that and just kind of see what God has to say to us. So, let us hold unswervingly to the hope we profess, for he who promised is faithful. And let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds. Not give up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another, all the more as you see the day approaching. I'm going to look just at verse 25 here for this first point, and that is, don't give up. We want to see what God's going to do, and we know he said he's going to do it. If you read the Bible, he said he's going to build his church. We know he's going to do it. Don't give up. There's a story towards the end of the Gospels, and it's this powerful interaction between Jesus and Peter. If you don't know much about the story of Jesus and Peter, Peter was a disciple of Jesus, a follower, and Jesus had called him out. He was actually the one that Jesus said, you are the one that I'm going to build the church. You're the rock. And Peter was a fisherman, and he gave up his life of being a fisherman, followed Jesus for 2 years. And what happened is he deserted Jesus in his hour of need. When Jesus was just about to be crucified, Peter pretended that he didn't really know who he was, and it's a very awful, awful situation. And so Jesus then dies and is resurrected, and Peter goes back to his normal life. He gave up. He'd seen Jesus, experienced Jesus, lived with Jesus, and thought, I don't know if I can keep going. I'm giving up on this thing. And Jesus comes and appears to him. And there's this incredible interaction on the beach. So Peter's just been doing the fishing thing, the thing that he's just gone back to and given up on this faith thing. And there's this interaction. Jesus says, it's kind of cryptic and it's a little bit unusual, and it's like, feed my lambs, and there's this weird kind of interaction. But the general gist of it is Jesus is saying to Peter, don't give up. Don't give up on the church. Remember, you're going to be the one that is going to build this thing. You might be sitting here tonight feeling like, you know what, I feel like giving up. And Jesus is saying to us, don't give up. We're sitting here tonight in a church 2,000 years later from this interaction, on the other side of the world from this interaction, and yet we're sitting here because of that interaction. Because Jesus appeared to a man and said, don't give up. We sit here today understanding more about Jesus and living in his fullness. I'm sure in those stories there's many times when people were starting out hospitals, they wanted to give up. I'm sure when they were getting Mueller School off the ground, there's lots of times they wanted to give up. I'm sure the journey that God has us on here at Lifepoint, there's going to be lots of times that we want to give up. And Jesus is saying to us tonight, don't give up. Some people need to hear that. You may have been hurt badly. You may have doubted whether this whole church thing is worth it. But don't give up. The next thing the passage goes on to say is spur each other on. Encourage one another. The most simple and almost best way to do this is to show up. Don't give up, show up. One of the most encouraging things you can do for someone is just show up. I know if I have like a dinner or something at my house and I invite people, I'm not super encouraged by the people that just don't show up. I'm encouraged by the people that do. So don't give up, instead show up. My mum, I got a picture of my family, I think, about to go up. Oh, look at this, beautiful. So Mariah and I are in the middle, then there's my parents on the front, a whole bunch of grandkids. You can see Dan there, he's the one with the super tight painted on shirt you're far right. My mum, she loves it when we all show up to a family event. She just loves it when we're all present. Sometimes I go because I want to. I really want to go to a family event. And I know my mum's here tonight, but I'm going to say this anyway. Other times I go because my mum nags me to go. She's like, Zach, it'd be awesome if you and Mariah came tonight or come along. But she loves it when we all show up. This is just like what God's like. He loves it when we show up. I don't go to a family event because I can get something out of my family at all. It doesn't work like that. I'm not going to try and get something out of my family. I go because it's not the same without us there. The family's not complete, and it's the same with us tonight. It's the same in your church, the places where you call church. It's not the same if you don't show up. I don't know if you knew this, but church isn't about you. It's for you, though. Church isn't about you, it's for you. I know one of the best things I can do in my life is have a healthy, functioning family. How do I get a healthy, functioning family? I show up. One of the quickest ways to cause dysfunction and problems is me to just stop showing up to anything family related. But I know it's what's best for me. It's the same with church. One of the best things we can do to see the mission of God happen, to be the light to our community, is show up. I'm just going to kind of list the things of what this may look like for you. Now everyone's on a different scale tonight. Everyone's in a different place tonight. I'm just going to read a list of things, and one of these things might be like, yep, that's the one for me. This is what showing up may look like. It may mean coming to church regularly. It may mean joining a small group. It may mean serving at church. It may mean just being emotionally present wherever you are. Just show up actually emotionally and be yourself. It may mean devotional time with God. It may mean catching up with someone intentionally. It may mean sharing an encouraging note. It may mean standing up for justice. It may mean sharing the gospel with someone. It may mean a range of different things. But what God's calling us to do tonight is to show up. Show up. Don't give up. Feels tough sometimes. We question whether it's worth it, this whole church thing. But don't give up. Instead, show up. The band's just going to come back. We're just rounding out now. And there's just one last thing I want to say. So yeah, band, come on up. This is not this can easily become an extra thing you just have to do, right? It's like, oh, Zac just told us to show up. I better start showing up at things. That's not the way God intended it. It's not a guilt thing here. It has to be focused on Jesus. What does that verse 23 say? I think we'll chuck it up on the screen here. Let us hold on swervingly to the hope we profess, for he who promised is faithful. It's not about what we do here. It's about him. Jesus, God. They've given us a hope, and they have promised that it is faithful. It has to be focused on Jesus. There is a one that has never given up on you. There is a one that has never given up on me. Just this week, there was moments where I was like, you know what, I don't really want to do the God thing. I want to do my own thing for a bit. I don't know if you had anything similar this week. There was moments where that happened, and Jesus said, Jesus is there, and he's not giving up on me. He's not giving up on you. He's continuing pursuing you. And talk about showing up. If there's a man that showed up, his name's Jesus. When humanity needed it most, when we were at a dead end, when we were dead in our sin, when we were dead in our brokenness, when we had nowhere to go, when we had nowhere to be saved, who showed up? Jesus. He showed up 2,000 years ago, taking the sacrifice, taking the weight of the world, gave up his life. Talk about someone that can show up. And he showed up here tonight. He shows up every day. He's with you. If you have invited Jesus to do life with you, he's with you now. He's with you everywhere you go. He's alongside you, just saying, hey, here if you need. Here if you need. We don't not give up and show up just because it's another thing that we got to do and because we want to have a good church or anything like that. We do it. It's because that's who Jesus is. That's what he's done. That's who he is. And we just want to be people like Jesus.